open the door a little bit. Just a little bit's okay. A little bit's all right. Or go over to this door. Yeah, we'll open the window a little bit and we'll just play around with sin. No. He detests it. He hates it. And immediately, if we have sinned, we need to confess when we have yielded to temptation. Now, if you are tempted to sin, that's not sin. But when we give in to the temptation, that's sin. And when we do it, immediately we need to ask Him to forgive us as a Christian and to fill us with His Spirit. I'm so glad you picked out the songs about yielding to the Spirit and Spirit, fill me now, fill me now. Because when we find ourselves sinning, ask God to forgive us as a Christian and to fill us anew with His Spirit. Well, Max Lucado, you may have read some of his books, I don't know, Just Like Jesus. He said he had recently in his writing said he had shared a meal, a dinner or a meal with a couple, a husband and wife, and they wanted to tell him about a storm, S-T-O-R-M, a storm that they were presently, right now, they're in that storm and they were trying to weather that storm. Through a series of events, the wife of this couple, the wife learned that her husband had committed an act of infidelity a decade, 10 years ago. He should have told her, but he didn't do it. And then he got found out. And he made the mistake of thinking that it's better not to tell her, but he didn't. She found out, and as you can imagine, that woman, that lady, was deeply hurt. Now, through the advice of a counselor, they dropped everything, what they were doing in work and home, and they went away on a retreat together. Now, a decision had to be made. They had to make a decision for their marriage. Were they going to flee from their marriage? Were they going to fight in their marriage? Or were they going to forgive? So they prayed, and they talked, and they walked. And then we find they reflected. Oh, in this case, the wife was clearly in the right. A number of women have left for far less reasons, have left the marriage. She could have left. She could have stayed and made his life a living hell on earth. That's what she could have done. She could have. Well, other women have done that. But this particular woman chose a different response. On the 10th night of their trip, Max Lucado said, his friend, they were friends, the husband and the wife, and his friend, the man, found a note on his pillow. A note on his pillow. Well, she wrote on the note, the top part, it said, I'd rather do nothing with you than something without you. I'd rather do nothing with you than something without you. And then she wrote that, she printed that verse. And then she wrote a note down at the bottom, and here it is. Here's what it said, and she put it on his pillow. And here's what it is. I forgive you. I love you. Let's move on. I forgive you. I love you. And let's move on. You know what? Someone mentioned this, and I believe it. I'm coming back. I'm just stooping over to pick up two things, so don't get too shook up. Now, I hope I don't spill this. Here's a basin, and here's a pitcher of water. Now that pen, P-E-N, that she used to write that note could have been like fresh water being poured in a basin. Right? That's right. This basin of water. It's like Jesus used, didn't he? What did he do with the disciples' feet? He washed their feet. And that pan was just like fresh, clear water being poured into. You're glad I didn't have too much and it overflowed, I know. I don't blame you. You're scared. I'm going to put it down. I hope I don't step in it. Get my tie in it. Well, you know what? She really washed her husband's feet. She didn't wash her husband's feet, but she really did. She did in forgiveness. She did with that note. You know, certain conflicts can only be resolved with a basin of water, pitcher of water. Are there relationships that you know of, even in our congregation, in our sanctuary, that are thirsty for mercy? So we don't want to doubt His love either. Well, question number 3. Let's go right on. Are you an obedient, O-B-E-D-I-E-N-T, are you an obedient servant? Well, here's 1 John chapter 2, verses 3 and 4. It goes like this. Are you an obedient servant? Well, it said, we know, 1 John 2, 3 and 4, we know that if we have come to know Him, that we have come to know Him if we obey His commands. The man who says, I know Him, but does not do what He commands is a liar, and the truth isn't in him. That's how we'll know that we love God, right? When we love God, we obey His commands, and we love people around us. We prove that we're Christians by our love, don't we? According to God's Word, yes. How we live and just delight in and love doing the will of God, that doesn't mean that we're obedient exactly 100% of the time. Sometimes we have to ask God to forgive us for sins called the sins of omission, as well as the sins of commission. Commission, I may have gotten angry with somebody and really gave them a piece of my mind with my words. Had to go back and ask Him to forgive me. Then I had to ask God, forgive me because I haven't been very helpful to my neighbor. I may not even have spoken to my neighbor. Okay? Now, listen to John Bunyan. John Bunyan, wasn't he the author of Pilgrim's Progress? He was a former prisoner. And he said this, one sentence I want to share. That you have not lived until you have done something for someone else who cannot repay you. Oh, wonderful. You haven't really lived until you've done something for somebody and they can't possibly repay you. And you didn't do it to brag about yourself. You didn't do it to make them feel small. You did it because the love of God's in your heart. Wow. Well, question number 4. Well, before we go to that, what if nobody ever knew it? And day after day, some of you may be doing this, or all of you. What if day after day, there's a little elderly gentleman or a lady, and he or she lives by themselves in a little apartment, and nobody knows it, and you go every day, and those calloused, wrinkled feet, you see that their sock or their stockings are taken off, and you wash their feet every day for them. They can't do it. They can't possibly do it physically. They're not able to. Now, if nobody else did that, if nobody else knew what you were doing, would you still do it? That's what He said for us to do, didn't He? Be an obedient servant. Question number 4. Are you separated from the world? Are you separated from the world? Now, 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. It goes like this. 1 John 2, 15 to 17. Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For everything in the world, the cravings of sinful man, the lust of his eyes, the boasting of what he has and does, comes not from the Father, but from the world. Verse 17, the world and its desires pass away, but the man who does the will of God lives forever. Now, Christians are to be a peculiar people. You knew other people think we're weird at times, right? They think we're insane. They think we're nuts. Why do you get up and go to worship at 10:30 in the morning on Sunday? Why, we sleep till 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Why do you do that? We don't even go to bed till 4 or 5.